Hey friends, good morning. Derek from Bomb Socks here with more Bomb Bites, where we feast upon the words of Christ and we do it one bite at a time. Hey, so I've enjoyed going through church history with you for these last couple of weeks here, and I'm excited for this week as well. There's some great things coming up as we're going through the Doctrine and Covenants and going through the Joseph Smith history, especially during this week. So this week we're going to hit on Joseph Smith history about 27 up through 54, and then we're going to also hit section 2 later on this week. So I wanted to bring up something to you that I want you to think about, particularly those of you who are maybe teenagers or raising teenagers or were once a teenager or know a teenager, either way. So I want you to think, what do we know about Joseph Smith as a teenager other than the first vision, right? First vision, he's in his 15th year, so he's 14 or 15 there. And so I'm looking at about ages 14 to 17. What was he like? What did he like to do? What were his friends like? Was he a normal teenager? So as we're doing this, I want to take you over to verse 28. So as you look at verse number 28, there's a lot going on here. It is a gigantic verse. So verse 28, during the space of time which intervened between the time that I had the vision and the year 1823, having been forbidden to join any of the religious sects of the day, which we talked about, and being of very tender years. The very tender years are the 14 to 17 years of age. So those of you who are there, you're in very tender years. Those of you raising those, very tender years. And persecuted by those who ought to have been my friends and to have treated me kindly. We'll talk more about that actually tomorrow and the next day. And if they suppose me to be deluded, to have endeavored in a proper and affectionate manner to have reclaimed me, I was left to all kinds of temptations. This is an interesting character sketch of Joseph. Keeping in mind, this is 18 years later that he is giving this, as he's doing this in 1838. Mingling with all kinds of society, I frequently fell into many foolish errors and displayed the weakness of youth and the foibles of human nature. I know foible is a word we use all the time. Foibles are just minor weaknesses of character, which I am sorry to say led me into diverse temptations offensive in the sight of God. In making this confession, no one need to suppose me guilty of any great or malignant sins. I love how he says that. He's like, all of a sudden he's like, hey, look, I wasn't out knocking off liquor stores doing horrible stuff, okay? A disposition to commit such was never in my nature, but I was guilty of levity, and sometimes associated with jovial company. Wow, here's the guilty. You're hanging out with happy people. Not consistent with the character which ought to be maintained by one who was called of God as I had been. But this will not seem very strange to anyone who recollects my youth and is acquainted with my native cheery temperament. You know, Joseph, everything I've studied about Joseph was a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. You know, and you look at all the difficult things that he went through in his life. Joseph, by nature, I think he was a hard worker, but he's just native, cheery temperament. And so because of that, he found himself what he called guilty of levity. So levity, the definition of levity is the treatment of a serious matter with humor or in a manner lacking due respect. And so as you're reading that, you're probably just like, oh my word, I am guilty of levity as well. You know, in the world that we live in, especially, there is so much out there that could be construed as levity. I know, again, I don't think Joseph is saying I'm guilty of having fun. I'm guilty of smiling. I'm guilty of joking. I'm guilty of joking around. I don't think that's what he's saying, but he's looking at this going, I saw God, I saw Jesus Christ, and I maybe needed to take these teenage years of mine a little bit more seriously. And maybe, you know, those who are right around that age, the 14, even up into the 19, those getting ready for missions and so forth, maybe guilty of levity might be something that hits you a little bit harder. And maybe that's something that, now again, I don't want to look at that as, like Joseph said, a great malignant sin, but I still think it can be something that can cause us to not feel the Spirit as much. So the question is, what does levity look like today? Why should it be something that a 14 to 17-year-old should be more cautious and aware of? So a couple years ago, I was having a conversation with a group of ninth graders, you know, right around that tender age of 14 to 15. And I just said, guys, what does levity look like? And one kid, just a good boy, raises his hand. He goes, too many memes. And we all just laughed. I thought it was funny. And again, there's a lot of great meme pages out there. I know several folks running these pages, great individuals, but even they will tell you, yeah, yeah, you can't look at memes all day long. It can be a waste of time. They have their place, just like video games have their place, other things, they have their place. But it's when we're focusing way too much on those things and we're way off balance with that. The Holy Ghost gets to a point where he can't really talk to you because we may be so distracted. I remember there's a great quote from Boyd K. Packer. I think I've mentioned this quote, how the Spirit does not get our attention by shouting or shaking us with a heavy hand. Rather, it whispers. It caresses so gently that if we're preoccupied, we may not even feel it at all. And some of that preoccupation might be with things that are a little bit more on the levity side of things. So that's one thing I would just have you think about. Here's a great little quote from a talk a couple years ago from Elder Lance Wickman. Elder Wickman said, "Does that have a familiar ring to you? Guilty of levity or associating with jovial company? Doubtless, all of us have been guilty of these. These are not, and in Joseph's words, like I was saying earlier as well, great and malignant sins, but they are unworthy of those called of God as we have been." Paul's great expression rings down the centuries. When I was a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. The time has come to put away childish things. This means developing a genuine sense of purpose about life. It means seeing today as the wondrous opportunity it is. Today is the day to make the most of your education, to prepare for missionary service and for temple marriage. Today is the day for magnifying church callings and responsibilities, for thrusting aside self to render Christian service. Today is the day for the right decisions and resolute determination, your mallet and chisel to prepare for tomorrow. This is the very essence of being about your Father's business. And so, again, as we're talking about this, I don't want you to think, oh, great, I look at TikTok, I look at memes all day, I'm a horrible human. I don't believe that. I honestly don't believe that. But what I do believe is those things, there's a time and a place for those in our lives. And especially as you're getting close to missionary age, there is a time maybe where you set some of those things aside and you focus on the things that maybe are a little bit better. So here's Joseph saying the very same things, like, I'm guilty of levity and hanging out with jovial company. So that's what I would recommend to you, is maybe look at how you're spending your time, and maybe levity might be a thing to be looked at. So anyway, I hope that helps you out. I hope that gives you some things to think about. You guys are awesome. Have a wonderful day, and we will see you tomorrow. Godspeed. Bye-bye.